Yes, welcome in. Badgers back for their bye week, getting ready to host number 24 Washington. I believe that's 5 ranked teams in their last 7 games. Does that sound about right? Indiana, Alabama, Michigan, Ohio State, Oregon, and now Washington. The only teams that weren't ranked were Maryland and Iowa. They've got another ranked game coming up next week against a team that right now I believe is ranked number 2 in the country. In Indiana, that game's going to get kicked off, but yeah, it kicked off at 11 a.m. But we've got plenty to get to here as Luke Fickell spoke yesterday, and we also have a decommitment to talk about and injuries and a whole bunch of stuff to get to. Before we do, as always, if you're listening to this, we do have a YouTube channel, The Camp. Go just search it, subscribe. We appreciate it. Helps us grow the show. We also got all of Jesse's work up at badgerconnect.com. What you working on this week?
Well, our next Badger Bites is running Wednesday. It's a one-on-one with Austin Rapp. Basketball has started. I know this is a football show, but Badgers kicked things off with a win against Campbell. And then plan to talk to Cooper Catalano and Mason Posta this week. They are 2 bright spots in what has been an otherwise fairly dismal season. And obviously, big game against Washington this weekend and plenty more coverage on the way at Badger Connect.
So before we move on, we did have a press conference yesterday where Luke Fickell spoke, but before he spoke, Chris Bono, the wrestling coach, spoke as well. And then at the end of his press conference, he's like, "Hey, Jesse, where's that video?" So you have a video of you put on the tights and you got in on the mat against some guys, huh? Was it against Chris?
It was not against Chris. I've put myself in some physically compromised situations here in the interest of creating content for these Badger Bites videos. This was by far the most foolish decision I've made to date. I did strap on the singlet, went up against their 174-pounder, Luke Condon. He was only a high school state champion in California a few years ago and started every dual meet a year ago. So what could go wrong? A whole hell of a lot. That's coming out in a couple weeks.
Yeah, looking forward to that one. As I told you yesterday, I enjoy all the videos, but that one I think is probably one of the more anticipated ones, at least for me, to see, just because you put yourself out there in some of these situations, and certainly not something I would ever want to do. And so it's fun to watch you try and take on some of these sports, whether it's volleyball or golf, golf obviously is something that you do, but the volleyball and the wrestling, and even throwing the football.
Running the hill was not a great idea either, but yeah, I survived.
But you didn't puke.
That's because I quit before I puked. I was definitely sore from this wrestling one for like 4 days. You start working muscles you didn't even know existed. But I've also never wrestled a day in my life, so I should throw that out there.
Never returned volleyball.
No.
Either. So you're learning new things. All right, let's jump into this. Luke Fickell spent like 25 minutes talking yesterday, and I want to say at least 17 or 18 of those minutes were talking about the quarterback and who is going to be the quarterback for Wisconsin moving forward. And as has been the case plenty of times this year, Luke Fickell was not willing to say who the quarterback was going to be. They're going to let this play out the rest of the week and then see what it is. Whether we think that's true or not, I think is up for debate, because you have to, you had all bye week to make some of these decisions. So I feel like they have a plan. I would hope they have a plan in place to get the person who's going to be playing the most reps in practice. But it is a bit of a guessing game. And the one name that everyone's been talking about really, since the beginning, since Billy Edwards Jr. went down, and some of the play from Danny O'Neill and Hunter Simmons has been uneven, to say the least, is Carter Smith, Wisconsin's 4-star true freshman. And Luke Fickell said he is a possibility this week, Jesse.
Obviously, as I've said before, we have not seen practice since the middle of August, so that's 2.5 months now, and therefore don't know the type of progression that he's made. Having said that, they are at a point right now where I feel like he needs to play. He needs to play in some capacity. I'm not saying you start him and give him every single rep, but if he is one of the potential cornerstones, or at the very least someone who represents hope and is even close, I think he needs to be able to show what he can do, because Wisconsin is 2-6 right now. They're not going to be favored the rest of the way. And that's not to say that the staff is throwing away this season, but you can't sit here and tell me that the quarterback play they've had this last month is worthy of continuing to play those guys. And I think I should say this. It's worth acknowledging that Hunter Simmons was in a tremendously difficult spot. I went and looked at these teams that he's played in terms of total defense. All 4 teams in October, top 20 total defense. Michigan was the worst at 18. Ohio State right now ranks number 1 in total defense. Iowa is number 2. Oregon is number 4, in part because they have got to play Wisconsin. But it's a large enough sample size at this point that you can say they've been able to do that pretty consistently. But if you just look even at these last 3 games, which of course have been as poor a quarterback play as we've seen in a long time, Hunter Simmons in those 3 games, so that excludes Michigan. Not that he was great in that game, but he did show enough to continue to be the starter. But these last 3 games, he's completed 21 of 54 passes. That's 38.9%. He's averaging 74 yards passing per game, and he's got 1 touchdown and 4 interceptions. He's got 2 TDs and 5 picks all season. I know there are a lot of other issues, okay? Their running back room is decimated. The offensive line hasn't been what it needed to be, but you cannot continue on that path with that type of quarterback play. And if Carter Smith is even close, at the very least, he can give you a little bit different dynamic. I think the thing you would hear that is why you would not want to do it is, oh, well, you don't want to wreck a kid's confidence, especially if he's not ready. And that's fair, but also, why did you bring him here? You are at the lowest point that you've been quarterback-wise in a number of other areas for this program. So let's see what the guy's got. If you were ever worried about a red shirt, you don't have to worry about that because you only have 4 games left. So even if it's some packages, we know he's got tremendous mobility. He's got good arm strength. Does he have the touch? Does he have the consistency? Does he have the relationships or, that you need to have with the wide receivers in terms of continuity? I don't know, but give him a chance in practice and see what he's got. And if you want to use Hunter Simmons or Danny O'Neal, fine, to some degree. I think it's high past time to see Carter Smith.
Yeah. I think it's also pretty clear that, if Danny O'Neal couldn't get in the last few games for the way that Hunter Simmons played, I can't imagine they're going to go back to him now, right? Even though in the competition that he played was significantly less than what Hunter Simmons played. I just don't know how you have any confidence if you're a guy on that offense in that wide receiver room. If you have any confidence, why you would have any confidence right now in Hunter Simmons or this passing game in general? Like, where would the confidence come from? Because just very little has gone right in the passing game. And so, here's the thing. Carter Smith, not a passer at this point. At least, again, we haven't seen him, but he was not a big time passer, even in high school, because he got hurt late. And we saw him in spring. The arm strength wasn't great. He's added a ton of weight since he showed up. So I think that probably will improve it. I know that when we talked to Vinny Anthony way back in, was it July at Squat Fest? He talked about how he had seen a big jump in that. So maybe it's taken an additional jump, but what he does give you is the ability to take off and run. And he's not Danny O'Neal, like extending plays, taking off and run. He is, we can do some run game stuff with me. If I'm Carter Smith, we can do some run stuff with me, right? I'm gonna keep the ball. I have no problem keeping the ball, and I have no problem pulling it down and taking off. And when you're a young quarterback, or when you have an offensive line that has been struggling to protect your quarterback, you need a guy that's going to be able to get out there and make up for mistakes or make up for the inability to keep the pocket clean. And he is absolutely that guy. Again, passing wise, you said it. He made some plays a few times in fall, made some throws, but for the most part, him and Milos were not too far apart. One question we should have asked Fickell was about Milos. Is there a chance that Milos is going to play? But no, obviously Carter Smith, what do you have to lose? Now, again, Luke Fickell has said that about other games and continued to go status quo. So I don't know that rings true for him here, but I think it does for everybody else that has been watching this team and has had to see what's been going on this year.
I think if Carter is going to play, we should also set externally some realistic expectations for this. When I talked to people and wrote about him when he committed to Wisconsin, this was last November, near the signing day after that whole Michigan fiasco, and Carter had to decommit. What I heard was he's got the mindset of a linebacker. He seeks out contact. You can do those kinds of things in high school. You cannot do those things consistently at the college level. Having said that, there is something to be said for the skill set that he possesses. And at this point, I really feel like Wisconsin is just looking for a spark. It's not like you're counting on somebody to lead the program this season to the 4-game winning streak that's going to turn everything around. But we've seen these pockets of sparks with some of these young guys. We talked about Mason Posa and Cooper Catalano. We saw what Gideon Atuka could do. Granted, those guys showed that they were ready for that moment, and we don't know how ready Carter Smith is. So I think there's got to be a baseline here of what is feasible for Carter at this stage. We don't see true freshman quarterbacks play at Wisconsin, but we also don't see Wisconsin in this dire of a quarterback situation. And I'd also say I had a chance to talk to Carter in the summer, and really the story was about where he felt he had grown because he was an early enrollee. And I think that's another thing we should acknowledge here is a lot of these quarterbacks, even when they're top level quarterbacks at the high school level, they just get to stand back there and chuck it or do whatever they want to do. And because they're the best athlete, because they've got so many great attributes, they can make something happen. And he talked about the learning curve in the spring, recognizing and identifying defensive coverages. You just don't really have to do that in a lot of these high schools. And of course, as we mentioned before, when Kenny Guyton talked to us in the spring, some of the really simplifying details, crouching behind the center and taking a snap instead of the shotgun, which is basically all he did. And I remember we talked about this in the summer. He said the reason that he crouched so low and Kenny Guyton gave him some guff is because he hadn't done it since middle school when they played no wing tee, and he was just trying to hide behind everybody because the wing tee is all about deception. So there is a learning curve. I think he's clearly made tremendous strides. But what does that mean when you get into a game and you're playing a top 25 opponent? I don't know, but I just want to throw all that out there to kind of set what realistic expectations ought to be. If you think he's coming in to be the savior, I don't know that that's fair. On the other hand, can he just give you a little bit of a spark? Can he use his legs, pick up a couple first downs, and maybe you rotate him with somebody else? As you said, what do you have to lose? I mean, honestly, at this point, the quarterback play has just been so poor that you need something, and something's got to be different.
They are not, it is not the best comparison, but it is kind of on this level. Scotty Fox Jr., he's a quarterback, true freshman at West Virginia. Read that he's the first true freshman starting quarterback at West Virginia since 1952. I didn't even know they allowed freshmen to play football, as true freshmen in the 50s. I thought that didn't happen until the 70s. But either way, he is not a great passer, but he has given them a little bit of a boost, including beating Houston this past week, because he's got some ability to get out and move, and use his legs to extend drives and to put pressure on defense. And I think that might be the best, not comparison, but the best thing that you're looking for. It took a couple games. He didn't necessarily jumpstart him right away, but certainly had a really nice game against Houston this past week and beat a team that was 7-1. It was looking like a potential if they were to win the Big 12, getting into the playoffs. So Houston, I should say West Virginia is still, but they at least have a win, one of the worst Power 4 teams. They were in the talk along with Wisconsin and Oklahoma State and some other teams. And so they got a little bit of a jolt from him, and his legs are certainly a huge part of it. And so for you, what are your expectations? You said we have to set expectations. We shouldn't set them too high. Well, what are your expectations if he were to get in? And I'm not saying, here's the thing. Do you think he starts?
I would be surprised, but I also don't know what their plan is this whole week. I would be surprised.
Okay. So he doesn't start. What are the expectations when he comes in? Is it just going to be simply packages? Are they going, which I hate. I'll be honest, despise that. They tried to do that with Danny O'Neil. It just doesn't. I don't like it at all. So that's that. I'm just saying that it's simply because Hunter Simmons has the strongest arm of the between him and Danny O'Neill, and he's willing to try and throw the ball down the field and all that good stuff. But just commit to somebody and stick with them in a game.
I mean, I think it's asking a lot to just put him in there and have him handle every series. On the other hand, it is much more challenging if you do only get in a handful of times and it is a package, or maybe it's like we saw previously when they were trying to utilize Danny O'Neill. Do you give him X series and see what he can do? Expectations, I think whoever's out there is going to take his lumps. I don't think it's realistic to think, oh, Carter Smith is going to go in there and things are going to be super clean and he's going to move them right down the field and they're going to get touchdown drives. They haven't been able to get touchdown drives all season, and they've gotten 2 touchdown drives the entire month of October. Can he get a first down or 2? That's where I'm at. And I've said this for several weeks now, but the bar right now is so low that even that would be an improvement because of how much of a struggle it has been. And yes, I know they're playing really good defenses, and Washington is a very solid defense. Like, they're a top 35, top 40 type defense. Obviously they've got 6 wins and they're a top 25 team, but that's kind of where I'm at. If you can get anything in the passing game out of him, that would be a bonus, but I don't know that you would expect him to come in and be able to do a lot of those things, at least right now, given the lack of experience and just what I think they would be asking him to do.
Again, he made a few throws that opened up your eyes a little bit in the spring. There's no doubt about it.
Get him on the run.
Yes. The one, I think the one we're both thinking of was the one running to the left, right? And throwing it right on the sideline. Is that the one you're talking about?
I mean, there's a few. I feel like a lot of them ended up going to Eugene Hilton Jr., which another guy who I think needs to get more opportunities. What Carter told me in the summer was where he feels most comfortable, and this is where I think if you're going to use him, Jeff Grimes has to be smart about how you call a game, and obviously I think that he would be. Anything with an option tag on it is his bread and butter. So you get him on the run and you allow him to make decisions, assuming he can be protected and has the time. I think he can thrive there, but I just don't know how many times you're going to do that or how many times you want to put him in harm's way.
Sure. So again, some of the best throws were on the run, as you have talked about. So that's that part of this equation in terms of the quarterback spot. The other thing is, and you asked Luke about it, is Billy Edwards Jr. And what exactly, first of all, I guess Danny O'Neill's situation is another part of this as well, where he can't even get in the game. But with Billy Edwards Jr., Luke said if it's 3 games, he'll put him in. If there's 2 games left, he'll put him in. If there's 1 game left, he'll put him in. But will he ever be healthy enough to play? That remains to be seen. And this whole situation continues to be a little bit murky, I think is a good word to use. It's not as if no one has talked to him this year, but we haven't had a chance to talk to him. Billy Edwards Jr., that is. It's been a while since we've had a chance to talk to him. And so we don't know exactly what's going on with him.
Yeah. I would say this ranks right up there with the most murky or vague quarterback situations. Number 1 is probably the Joel Stave situation, just because it was so bizarre and unusual and how that was all handled. We don't need to relitigate it, but this situation is so vague, and maybe that is in part because they don't have answers. And I know Luke hasn't been particularly forthcoming with a lot of this quarterback stuff, but if they had a firm answer, I think they would give it. And that is, look at the last 2 years. Okay, Tanner Mordecai, it's a broken hand. So he's out X number of games, or broken hand, what this means. Tyler Van Dyke, torn ACL. We're not going to see him the rest of the season. This injury is such that it just feels like they're sort of on pins and needles, waiting for something to change when you don't have what appear to be a firm diagnosis, because we saw what happened earlier in the season. Okay. He takes that shot to his knee in practice and then gets hurt on the 3rd series of the first game. You bring him back too early against Maryland. And so I don't know if they're trying to see how close to 100% he can get. I don't know if this is a situation where a medical redshirt is even a possibility. That is one of the things that I asked Luke, but I'm sure it's frustrating for Luke very clearly because the rest of the quarterback room isn't good enough to give Wisconsin a chance. And he's trying to take all that into account when he evaluates the offense as a whole, because we're asking him a lot of questions about the failures of the offense and the failures of the quarterback room. On the other hand, it's frustrating for us because we can't get any answers and we can't provide those answers to anybody. And it does feel like if he's healthy enough to play, at least based on what Luke said, that they clearly would want him out there. At a certain point, though, I do wonder what does the future hold for him? Can you get a medical redshirt if you don't play again? He took an initial redshirt year when he was a freshman, but if you only play in 2 games and it's X number of snaps, we'll have to see what happens. But for right now, yeah, it's a really difficult spot, and Luke did not have much clarity when I asked him. Basically, what I asked Luke is it realistic? Do you think it's realistic to believe we're going to see Billy at all here this last month? And then in turn, if we don't, is there a possibility for a medical redshirt? And he didn't really delve into that. Said he doesn't know what the NCAA would decide and whether they're even at that point. But all of this has just kind of wrecked the season, and it's been vague all year. And obviously, we have not been able to talk to Billy.
There has been some talk among the fan base that he is trying to get that medical redshirt and go somewhere else. Like he is a lot of people think he is not playing because he doesn't want to play, as opposed to being unable to play. Do you believe that?
No, I don't. But I also don't have a lot to go on. It's just my gut feeling. And I think, the ability for Billy to discuss this would help provide some clarity. But I also, if some of those decisions are being made, I can understand why perhaps you wouldn't want that out there. And so it's just a challenging spot for all of us, because I'd love to be able to give the people listening and watching better answers, but you can't do that unless you have an opportunity to talk to people. And right now it's just an ongoing process where we haven't seen him for over a month and still have no idea if we're going to see him at all here the last 4 games of the regular season.
Yeah, it's really tough. Again, I never got the impression from Billy that that's the type of guy he is, but I also am never, ever, ever, ever going to pretend that I know these guys.
Yeah.
Right? I'm never going to pretend that. I just won't. They can say certain things to your face and be completely different behind closed doors. I'm not saying that's everybody, and I'm certainly not saying that's Billy, but over the years, you get to a point where you believe what you see as opposed to you believe what you are told. And actions are obviously always over words, and we'll see if Billy plays for Wisconsin again. He just didn't seem like that type of guy based on my interactions with him. But again, I don't know.
Right? Yeah, I fall in the same place as you do, and of course, we only know these players in one setting. It's the very brief period that we have to interact with them in an interview, or before or after an interview, just shooting the breeze, stuff like that, and you can get a sense of their personality and who they are, and also that's one aspect of them and who they are. But with Billy, again, you liked everything that you heard from him and his personality, super outgoing, understood what it meant to come here and have 1 year and be the leader and all those things. And also, we're in November. You're in the middle of a season that isn't going your way as a program. You haven't played very much, and it's reasonable to look at these guys and say they also have to do what's in their best interests at a certain point. And I'm not saying that's what he's doing, but when you don't have answers, it leads to more speculation.
Yes, exactly. And again, he hasn't talked since before the Miami of Ohio game, before the season, right? Like last time we talked to him, I think was the week leading into that game.
Leading into the week 1 game against Miami, Ohio, I think you might be right, because he got hurt, so you're not going to hear from him afterward. Didn't play against Middle Tennessee, and we didn't know that we were going to see him against Maryland, and then he obviously got hurt.
Yeah.
Well, Alabama as well. He didn't play, so it's been a long time.
Also been a minute since quarterbacks have been made available for leading into games as well. So that's another tough thing here is there's only one person talking, and maybe that's the reason. Maybe that's why they want it that way. Luke Fickell's the only one that is answering questions on quarterbacks right now. The quarterbacks are not answering them themselves. And so we have to parse Luke's words. And that's not always the easiest thing to do either. But again, this is the third straight year having to deal with quarterback uncertainty. At least last year, you knew it was always going to be Braden Locke, even if that was not a good thing. At least you weren't unsure of who it was going to be on a week-to-week basis. You knew exactly who it was going to be. They were never going to Mabry. So it was just, you knew as soon as the injuries happened, there wasn't going to be any kind of a question of who it was going to be. And you were talking with Braden Locke every week leading into the game. So this year's just different. Also haven't talked with coordinators since fall camp as well. So that's also a little difficult for, trying to get how Jeff Grimes is managing this situation and how he's having to get a different quarterback ready or having to get multiple quarterbacks ready to play. So we'll see. It feels like they're just trying to keep one consistent message from the head coach. And that certainly, it feels like that's what they're trying to do. Would you agree or no? Just one consistent message.
Yeah, I would. I mean, at a certain point, you have to look at it from Wisconsin's perspective of like, what do they have to gain by making more people available, other than some more clarity and less speculation. But just the result is going to be what it's going to be on Saturday, and I guess we're left to guess more often than not here at this time of the year.
Yep. All right. So you're going Hunter Simmons starting on Saturday.
Oh man, I guess so. Yeah. How's that for enthusiasm?
Yeah. But I do think if he doesn't start, we're definitely going to see Carter Smith on Saturday, though, too. Agreed or no?
We better see Carter Smith in some capacity. Like, honestly, I just what's the phrase about expecting, insanity? Definition of insanity is doing the same thing and expecting a different result. I get we're not at practice, and I get that they may look at this and say, as Luke says every week, who gives us the best opportunity to win? But also, is there really a great opportunity to win? Because you're not scoring. So just use somebody who can give you something, even if it's for a handful of plays. In part because it can help you identify what your future could be. What if somebody does something well and you say, we want to see him more? What if it's not even close and you say, oh, he's definitely not ready, but at least we have some semblance of an answer. So let's see him. Let's just see him.
Agreed. All right, switching gears here. Luke Fickell also gave up some injury updates, and none of them good. Dylan Jones, done for the year with the toe injury. Jake Renfro, done for the year as well. He had surgery. Don't know what on. Probably a myriad of, there could be quite a few things he could have surgery on. And then Matthew Traynor as well, the safety, torn ACL, and he had surgery. So you lose those three guys. You don't know where some of the other guys stand, whether it's Christian Allegro or, as we talked about, Billy Edwards or Darry Dupree or Katie Iacomelli or Kerry Kadonko or, I could keep going. Preston Zachman. You can keep on going with the names, and a lot of names that we had been talking about quite a bit in the offseason, now not part of this. But, that's tough. That's obviously tough, but what it does do leads to more opportunities for some other guys, especially at running back, right?
Yes, absolutely. And Tim Brando was actually right on the broadcast when he said that Dylan Jones was out for the year, even though I think Wisconsin said he wasn't, but clearly he is.
Here's the thing. Where does Tim Brando get that information from?
Staff. In those conversations leading up to the game.
Right. I guess it's possible that they didn't for sure know he was going to be out for the rest of the season. Probably it might have been we'll see. Because the turf toe is always kind of, I think that's what it is.
Yeah.
It's always kind of not hit or miss, but you don't know exactly if a guy potentially could play through it. But obviously in this case he wasn't. That makes zero sense for Tim Brando to come out and say that. Wisconsin then to be like, no, that doesn't make any sense. And then for it to happen, there's a disconnect here. I would tend to lean toward Wisconsin, but because Tim Brando is but I think there is a disconnect somewhere. So the message got crossed somehow, some way. But for Wisconsin to come out and say he's not out, and then to a week later say he is, something happened there.
Either way, it's just another injury at a key position, and it means Gideon Atuka is going to get more opportunities. And don't know where Darian Dupree is at. Obviously, he didn't play in the last game. Cade Yakimelli got hurt, but Atuka did enough, 20-plus carries, 80-plus yards to get more opportunities. All of this is just another part of the story about this offense being nowhere near where it needs to be, but the running back room got thin very quickly, and they're going to have to figure out how to create some first downs. But Atuka, forgotten man in that recruiting class because you had Jones and Dupree, but man, he runs hard and he's got some nice bursts. So I imagine we're going to see more of him.
Yeah, that style of run, I think it just makes sense for this offense right now. One thing we should have talked about with the quarterback, and I think it kind of goes along with the offensive line because of the injuries to Jake Renfro and Kevin Haywood and Kerry Kidanko, is the idea that when they went to this offense, that the quarterback didn't need to be great like they did in the past offense because they were going to be able to lean on the power run game. They're going to be able to lean on the offensive line. And tell me if you agree with this take by Luke Fickell that the offensive line has been a bigger Achilles heel than the quarterback spot. Because he said that yesterday. He said, in some ways, and he always says in some ways, but he's saying essentially the injuries along the offensive line, which has not allowed them to gel. I mean, Jake Renfro's been in and out of the lineup. Kerry Kidanko's been in and out of the lineup. You have, you have moving Riley Malman over to left tackle. It hasn't been ideal by any stretch, but that's a huge thing to say considering the quarterback play.
I think that's a fair statement that he's making. It's harder to evaluate play to play how an offensive line is performing when you can look at the stats and see this quarterback is averaging 74 yards per game. Now, where you can see it is the inability to run the ball and the number of sacks Wisconsin has allowed. I mean, this group had allowed more sacks through half a season than the O-line a year ago did the entire season. Some of that certainly is on the quarterback. But yeah, I mean, again, if this offense was going to be built on the offensive line and predicated on that more physical run game and all the things that Jeff Grimes and this staff and these players talked about before the season about reestablishing what Wisconsin used to be, getting back to that core identity, and they haven't been able to do it. Yeah, I mean, that is a huge determining factor for why they haven't been good. And if you don't have that, is it reasonable to expect your backup quarterbacks to perform at a higher level? I don't know. I mean, I think, again, I'm not defending the quarterbacks. It's been really bad, but they haven't been able to run the ball. They've been averaging just over 3 yards a carry. All of this is why it's the worst offense, at least statistically, we've seen since early in the Barry Alvarez days. The running game has not been good. So if you don't have that, you don't have a lot.
Yes. It just, considering the quarterback started 1 for 12, he was 1 for 12 in the fourth quarter a week and a half ago.
Indefensible. It's indefensible, but it doesn't have help either. So
correct. But 1 for 12, Jesse?
Indefensible. It's horrible. I mean, I'm not defending the quarterbacks, but I can understand where Luke is coming from and saying the O-line play, which needed to be great. I think that's the other thing. Like, you weren't going into this season saying quarterback play needed to be great. You went into this season saying the offensive line play needed to be great to give Wisconsin a chance.
And here's the question. If Kevin Haywood doesn't get hurt, if Jake Renfro isn't continually dinged up, maybe it is. Maybe the line, maybe Emerson Mandel at right guard, again, which is where he played most of fall camp, even though he played pretty much all of last season at right tackle, or at least practice at right tackle. Maybe Kevin Haywood, Joe Brunner, Jake Renfro, Emerson Mandel, and Riley Malman is a very good offensive line. And maybe they are running the ball because they get to play together. They made the decision to go to this offense before Kevin Haywood got hurt, right? So the left tackle spot just and that injury just messed with so many things. But also, let's be fair about this. Jake Renfro's been dinged up his entire career. He's been at Wisconsin. So to think you can count on him to be there every game, he was able to play all of last year, but it's not that he was healthy the entirety of last year. But in 2 of the last 3 years, and if you want to go back to the time at Cincinnati, he's been dinged up more than he's been on the field. So counting on him may have been a mistake. But the left tackle spot, there's how many left tackles are there in the country that they could have gone and gotten and plugged in behind and been better, at least somewhat on the level of Kevin Haywood? There wasn't. They went for Heinzen, and he was clearly not. But now he's your starting center. Like, that is where this is at. It's been a disaster up front injury wise, and it's been very, very tough to do anything. And it's been tough to do anything with that offensive line just because there's so much uncertainty. They're going to start a different offensive line. It feels like every single week. Like they have to have been started 6 different lineups at this point, or more. Maybe it's 7. Maybe only had the same lineup in back-to-back games once. It's been very, very difficult for them to get any kind of consistency there, and we've seen the result of it. That said, I still think the quarterback is a bigger problem. So. But I understand where he's coming from and the idea that what they wanted this offense to be, the quarterback should not have had a big impact, but you needed the offensive line to also be at a very high level, and they just haven't gotten that. So, all right, moving on. Unless you wanted anything else you had to say.
No, we've talked a lot about the offense's failures, and it won't be the last time.
No. So, Wisconsin did lose a commitment last night. Aiden Reeder, the linebacker out of Ohio. I believe he just went to Michigan over the weekend. Or is he Indiana?
Nah, I can't keep track. I can't.
I'm almost positive he's from Ohio, but he ended up going to Michigan.
He St. Xavier. Yeah, that same school is where Chase Wolf was. It's a powerhouse in Ohio.
Right.
You're asking about the school, the college, but yeah.
No. He visited Michigan over the weekend. So he decommitted last night. He's not the first. He won't be the last. But you did ask Luke Fickell yesterday whether, because we've seen it, number of guys taking visits other places, do they consider those guys still committed to Wisconsin if they're going and taking visits? What did he have to say about that?
Well, he called it to some degree a bit of a loaded question, and I can understand that because he's in a spot where if he says, yeah, we don't consider guys visiting elsewhere to be committed, and he says it in that way, then these guys are going to be affronted personally by it and be like, well, why would I stick around? I think he danced around it or answered it as best he could because he's right. He says these guys are looking at other schools to some degree to protect themselves in whatever way that they can. But also we've had conversations with a lot of these people, so at least we have an understanding of their thought process. Having said that, I don't know how the word commitment has certainly changed a lot over time. And as we've seen in recruiting, it's never over until you sign. And the reason in part I asked that question was because the early signing period is a month away. Like, it may not feel like that because the season's been long and there are still 4 more games, but you've spent your entire year trying to build your recruiting class in 2026. And this last month is going to be a fight to the finish for a lot of them. As it stands now, they've got 14 committed players. When I asked Luke, at least publicly, there were 15 committed players, and you've got at least, I think, 5 of them had been looking at other schools. Aiden Reeder was one of them. Obviously, we know about Amari Latimer and the visit to Ohio State and some of these other schools. Jaden Pettit, who's the only other 4-star prospect in the class. It's Pettit and it's Latimer. He's visited Oklahoma. Jack Janda, a tight end from Michigan, has been looking at a couple Big Ten schools. I believe he's got a visit on tap for Michigan State. Iowa's also in the mix. DJ Baugh, it feels like. I don't know if both feet have been in the entire time because he's been tweeting about offers since after he committed. Like, that is a significant chunk of your class and most of your more highly rated guys. And I'm sure there's 1 or 2 others that other schools are poking around. So I don't know whether you can feel like anything is guaranteed. And Wisconsin is now in a spot where maybe scrambling is the best way to put it, but they're trying to come up with plan Bs here because there's, Quantavious Wiggins is a guy who's an FIU commit, and he's going to take a visit here this weekend. He's a running back. Well, why are you doing that? It's because the Amari Latimer situation is what it is, and you don't want to go into a class without a running back. So they're trying to like make up for some of this lost ground and at least put themselves in a decent position to get somebody else if they lose their plan A guy. It's not an ideal spot, but this is what happens when you don't win games and when your future as a staff is in question. Even if Chris McIntosh is going to back Luke as much as he is, these guys have to look out for themselves in the end. And when you don't know if that staff is going to be there next year, this is in part what happens. So I think this next month is going to be wild because I can't imagine this is the last decommit that we're going to see if guys this late in the process are continuing to visit other schools, because it means they're uncertain about Wisconsin.
The vibes are not high.
No.
The vibes are not immaculate. They are, it's a bit tough right now. Do you think it's going to get easier in the last 4 games? It's going to get harder. It's going to get even harder.
Yeah.
So, yeah, again, it was going to be a small class anyways, but now that you're losing some of these guys, it's in a bad spot.
Well, what it does ultimately is put you as a staff and recruiting department in a spot where there are always going to be players who can fill a spot, but you're dropping down a notch and hoping that you can hit a home run, hoping that somebody materializes earlier when you feel better about that opportunity when you go and get a more high-end guy. Like, there's a reason why most Power 4 schools in the country are going after Amari Latimer. He obviously put out on his X account the numbers that he produced. You see that and you go, okay, that can translate pretty early on at a place like Wisconsin. Whereas if you're going after somebody who is a non-Power 4 guy or somebody who doesn't have very many offers, you don't have a choice to some degree, but it's hard to see that developing earlier, which is what you need at this point in time. You need to have some home runs with these recruits so they can play early, because you just don't have time to wait 3 years right now.
No, you don't. Certainly not this staff, right? Like, we're seeing some of the fruits of their past 2 classes with Mason Posa and Cooper Catalano, and this past week against Oregon with getting into Tuca. And we know Emerson Mandel and Colin Coverly up front. And we know that Kevin Haywood, if he had been healthy, he'd be there. So like the offense, throw Grant Steck in there. He's going to be playing. He's had to play more this year with Tucker Ashcraft's injury. So like there are young guys that are playing, and there's more young guys in the wings for them, especially offensively, that if they stay, which we have no idea if they're going to, if they stay and you're able to grow together, and next year and then the year after, like that's the goal. That's what Wisconsin was. It was, have some upperclassmen that are good, and you can bring your freshmen along slowly. Well, these guys are having to play right now because of injury and other reasons. They're just the best guys they have. So,
yeah. And you also need enough guys to be able to fill out a room. And so this is another reason why it puts you in a tough spot. Let's look at wide receiver, for example. Okay. They had Tayshaun Bardo committed from Indiana. Now, I think Wisconsin ultimately chose to move on from that for a couple of different reasons. But now you've got Jaden Pettit potentially. I mean, certainly he's looking elsewhere. Well, if he goes somewhere else, then you're just left with one wide receiver in the class in Zion Legree. And Wisconsin is continuing to pursue other wide receivers, but you're also so late in the process that it's hard to make inroads. And then if you don't get the number that you needed, what are you left to do? You transfer portal? You got to pay up for those guys, presumably. Or do you look for the February signing period, which we've kind of forgotten about, but who's left in the February signing period? Not a lot. At least they'd have a couple months to try and reevaluate their board and see who's there. But it's just a really difficult spot when you start to lose guys this late in the process.
Yeah, that February date, I think a lot of it would be guys, at least in Wisconsin position right now, of seniors that have huge years, right?
It's the late eval.
Yeah, it's the guys that blow up late, and those guys could be huge for Wisconsin because you don't. But you have to be good on your evals, right? Like, it can't just be giving out offers to give out offers. These guys, blowing up late. Right. But as you said, you need to fill room sometimes too.
And it's not only that, you need to win that recruiting battle against other schools who are doing the late eval. So if his best offer is Wisconsin, then you're in a great spot. But if some other Power 4 schools come knocking, again, this is where Wisconsin is very challenged right now because of the lack of results on the field, where you can't sell hope and optimism the way you could 2-3 years ago.
Yes, that's gone, right? Gone. It's been gone for a bit here.
All you can sell is, hey, come be part of the solution and hope that they buy it.
Yes. Anything else on recruiting that you wanted to hit on?
No, but I just imagine there's going to be more discussion on this front over the next month, because I think Wisconsin is in a spot where, for all the work they've put in with a lot of these dudes, it's a fight to the finish, and they're just hoping to hold on. And clearly they're evaluating other players, and I imagine there are going to be further offers extended here very late in this process, just to put Wisconsin into a position to replace potential losses.
All right. A couple overreaction notes before we get going here. Wisconsin should not even consider firing Luke Fickell, considering the jobs that have come open already in this cycle, and the inability to find someone good enough to fill his spot.
So I'm going to say that's an overreaction based on that being the specific reason. Obviously, we've discussed quite a bit about his future and whether he should be here, but to do it based on that, I just think is, for lack of a better way to put it, a loser's mentality, to be like, oh, look at all these other openings. They're better than Wisconsin. They can offer more money. They're going to get better coaches. If you're going to do that, you're going to be in this spot every year. And I realize this year has some pretty powerhouse openings, but as I said a few weeks ago, you couldn't have told me at the start of the season that Penn State was going to have an opening a month into the season based on where the Nittany Lions were a year ago, the fact that they were a top 3 team and considered a national title contender, which means you don't know what's going to be open a year from now. So I don't think you make a decision based on that, though I understand why that's been a talking point. If you have enough to sell and you have connections and there are other coaches out there that you think you can get, you go ahead and do it. So I don't think this is a reason why you wouldn't do something.
Yeah, I think there's plenty of reasons why you wouldn't do it. The potential candidate pool is certainly one of them. I would also say it's not just the other openings that are there. It's also the uncertainty, at least in my mind, and I think in a lot of people's minds, about the athletic department as a whole and the person that's running it, and whether that person, will be making decisions moving forward. Like there's just, I think there's so much uncertainty that it's not just one thing as to why you wouldn't make the move to fire Luke Fickell. However, I did find it interesting. He was asked about all the openings and the buyouts and all that stuff. And he was talking about, some places are different. Some places there is very little patience, and this place is different. And I don't know if he was telling himself that or trying to speak it into existence, but that's essentially what he was doing. He was saying this place is different, and that's good for me. That ends up being the case, but did you not? That's the feeling I got. You can disagree with me.
I don't know that I listened to that answer.
Good. All right. Fantastic.
I'm just going to leave you out on an island on that one. But obviously, I know that he said a couple weeks ago that he didn't know necessarily what his future held. And yet there has to be a level of alignment behind the scenes, that there is some idea about what's taking place. And very clearly, Wisconsin, at least at this point, is not going to make a midseason firing, because you would have done it already. So I think there's probably something there that Wisconsin is more willing than perhaps other programs to get to a year for, when things haven't been particularly good here.
Thanks, Jesse. All right. The last one here, and I don't know, you probably didn't see it, but I retweeted it earlier, so maybe you can go look at it. Wisconsin is far and away the best drinking university and drinking fan base in the country. Is that an overreaction or
no? I didn't see this, so do you want to enlighten me? Was this?
I will.
Was this a very well-documented study that was produced?
So Matt Brown, who runs Extra Point, I believe that is I guess it's a newsletter. I've read it, but I didn't know if it was like a Substack or not. But yeah, Matt Brown, he put out a lot of requests, little freedom of information requests, and came back with the number of units sold and total revenue from alcohol sales. I believe this was in August and September, and Wisconsin sold, if my math is correct here, roughly 70,000 more units and $1 million more of alcohol in the first 2 months of the season than any other school that he was able to get to respond to his request.
So is this alcohol within Madison specifically?
No, this is at games. This is games.
At games.
Yep. Units sold at games, in stadiums, and the amount of revenue off of those. So Wisconsin, $1 million more than any other one that responded to him. And the units, like 70,000 more units than anybody else.
Well, hard to argue with those numbers. Maybe it's the fact it's still a bit of a novelty that you can actually purchase alcohol at games. But I think we know, beer, brats, cheese. Wisconsin is number one in a lot of core products. I would also say this. You can find what you're looking for at every school in America, all the way down to the small Division III schools. So if that's what you're into, it's everywhere, but those numbers you can't argue with.
I mean, Wisconsin does it different. I mean, it's a professional job for some, but the fact that I would like, I mean, the numbers for October and definitely November are going to be interesting. If Wisconsin can still outsell and out drink everybody else when you're only putting 40,000 people in a stadium, I think I'm interested to see exactly what that looks like.
It's going to be colder in November. I realize it's warmer now. And maybe those fans are going to want to forget what they're seeing. So there's 2 home games left. We'll see.
2 home games left, including the Saturday against Washington. That game going to kick off at 3:30. I think it's the first Big Ten game this year to kick off at 3:30. I don't think there's a night game, so maybe that's why it got pushed back a little bit. And then the Indiana game going to be at 11 a.m. So at least that massacre will only have to be on your mind for a couple hours to start the day. Some people that are drinking might even be up by then, but we'll see. We'll be back on Thursday to discuss the Washington game and maybe make some predictions about some other games as well as we close in on the final 4 weeks of the regular season. I don't know if we're going to do championship week. If I'm behind, we are. If I'm not, then we won't. But right now, it's not looking good for me. And someone sent me what he wore this past weekend. I actually think I think I'd be okay with that. It was because I think they went black. I think it wasn't a bad look. It wasn't a bad look. I think it's more the idea of who it is to have to dress up as him as opposed to the look itself. But either way,